to at 2:00 on October 23rd, 2023. Currently, we have seated for Oregon Commissioner Babbitt. I believe Commissioner Paulson is online, and Commissioner Thomas will be filling in for Commissioner Fox. On the Washington side, Commissioner Anderson is present. Myra, are you there currently? I do not see Myra. So we will have Commissioner Gilchrist filling in for Mayor Kiefler. And is Doug online yet? Yes, Doug is online. So we have Commissioner Gibson is online. Then we also have Nate and Jake in the online as well for our alternates. And we have Eric, and is Ben online? I do not see Ben. Okay. And that is Marla. So we'll do it again. So now we have Commissioners Anderson, Kiefler, and Gibson all seated, and Commissioner Berger, alternate Berger is in the room. So we have let the record show we have a quorum. And we will move in. Are there any modifications, additions, or changes to the agenda from anyone? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as is.
I will second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries.
That was her first motion.
Let the record show Commissioner Thomas is having a great day. Okay, next up, we have public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per individual. We have no one else in the room to provide public comments. Is there any public comment online? Is there any public comment online? Hearing none, I will close public comment and we will move into executive reports. I will skip the co-chair report this today and move directly into our project director bridge update.
All right, thank you. We continue to schedule and work on our agenda for our DC visit in November. So that will be between the 6th and the 9th. So Summit is working on that agenda, scheduling meetings for us. So we should see a draft this week that we'll send out to the group that's going to that event. October 31st, we're starting to lock down who's going to be here for the in-district event. We have 4 of the senators that are going to be here. We also have a couple representatives from Oregon State that will be here also. We have confirmation on the boat for the tours. So weather permitting, we will do some bridge tours. Right now there'll be 2 different trips that we'll need to take. And then the backup plan, if weather does not allow us to go do the tour, is to go to the Hood River Museum there on port property. So we'll go there as a backup plan to the event. So MPDG grant is still in review. We're waiting to hear back from that. The funding team is also working, and also on the Safe Streets for All. We're waiting to hear back from that grant. MPD, and that one, multimodal project discretionary grant. And that is actually 3 grants. That's the infra grant, the rural grant, and the mega grant. So we're waiting on those. We're in the process of submitting our bridge investment program, or BIP grant. That will go in November 21st. The treaty MOAs, Ms. Purse has, their legal team has actually sent comments back over to our legal folks for review. So FHWA's legal and our legal team are looking at those comments. Once they get through the comments with Nez Purse's legal, then we'll send out an update on that, but they're working through those right now. We also have a meeting tomorrow with Umatilla. We continue to progress that MOA. We've been adding comments, going back and forth with comments and responses, advancing that one. So those 2 MOAs are working through the process and are advancing. We're waiting on a meeting between FHWA and Yakima Nation in order to finalize Section 106 and also to move their MOA forward. And then we're also reaching out to Warm Springs, hoping to get another meeting with them. So two of them are moving forward, making progress. The other two, we're still working to get our next meetings. The Progressive Design Bill RFP is scheduled to go out next Tuesday. We're getting through final legal comments and reviews and buttoning up the contract. We've had meetings with WashDOT, ODOT, and FHWA on their comments, have worked through their comments. So we're in a good position right now to have that RFP out on the street October 31st. And that is it for this portion.
Are there any questions?
I have a question about the DC trip. Is that going to take place regardless of what's happening in DC?
As of right now, yes.
Okay, do we have legal on? All right. Open action items. Okay, if we have legal on, we can hear our legal report?
We did prepare a legal report. I think that the Dakota's firm marked it as confidential. Judy, do you want to run through it or how do you want to handle it?
Executive session portion on itself, but if you have anything legal for general, we'd be happy to hear that. Not seeing Judy, so we will move.
I'm sorry, you all. I couldn't get unmuted. Yeah, I need to just pull up the report and there may be some items on there that are suited for executive. I just need to pull it up.
If you'd like, Judy, we can come back to you in a few minutes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, next up, we have for the consent agenda, the aesthetic committee membership. Is there any discussion from anyone? Here.
I have a discussion. I just couldn't hit my button fast enough. So I guess I had more a general question regarding the committee structure itself. It's pretty heavy on agency representation and very light or non-existent on public participation. And so they will be undertaking work that is coming from the direction of the authority. Can we also be reevaluating what the committee makeup is? Or how is this coming forward from staff?
So this committee is a little different than the other four committees that we set up. This is not really an authority committee per se. This is a project committee that came out of NEPA and the requirements of NEPA. So we've been meeting with Columbia River Gorge Commission in order to identify regional representatives to be on the committee. And then the thought was, once we get those members established, then we will have public meetings where the public will be able to come in. But the idea was that these different regional entities and groups would represent different pieces of the public. We could do a public at large member if we wanted to, but we were also trying to, contain the committee to a reasonable size, and then do public meetings where we would take it out to the public and get public comment as the committee develops the different ideas.
I mean, I would be supportive of one or two at-large public seats on the actual committee. I think it will benefit us long-term to show genuine effort in engaging them. And from being at a few of the events this summer, I know there were specific people that would express this interest of this part, and we all know it'll be a higher profile part of the project. So if I'm understanding you, this is capturing what the requirements are for what we need to be doing related to our NEPA. But if we could go above and beyond and add in some true protected seats that are public, not aligned with an agency individuals from our communities, I think it would be beneficial.
Yeah, we can add that and then we can do some kind of public outreach to identify a couple people that may want to be on the committee. Part of the ask right now is to get permission to start calling some of these members and seeing if they would like to participate and are open to participating. And then once we get that consolidated down, then we'll actually have the committee, but we can add that piece to do some public outreach as well. And then also permission for Commissioner Wilson to be the board's representative on the committee.
Commissioner Edwards.
Oh, hi everyone. I just wanted to second what Marla said. Looking at the committee breakdown, I see a lot of governmental agencies, I see a lot of nonprofit. I think it would behoove us to include a community member at large. I think it's a great this committee would be a great opportunity for the local community to get involved in.
Thank you, Commissioner. Would it make sense to have a community member at large from Washington and one from Oregon?
Yeah.
Okay. And then on here, I see there's the names in green. Are those the people you've reached out to and they've agreed to, or what's the green mean?
The green were the identified members that we would contact to see if they were open to participating. So, and we created this list through working with the Columbia River Gorge Commission, and kind of came to a consensus that this was the people we thought would participate. So if we get a big group that doesn't want to participate, we may need to come back and look at the names, but the thought was trying to control the size, get representation without a lot of duplication, and coming up with a committee from that. And then the intent would be to have the first meeting around January of next year, but spend the next month getting the committee together.
And Commissioner Babbitts is going to.
That's what I was gonna ask, what does yellow mean?
Were you yellow? I think you were the only yellow, if I remember. Yes, that was because you were not representing the board, you were representing a different interest. And we want to make sure we confirm that that's correct.
But I'm they're also in green with Eric for the Bridge Authority, yellow for the Columbia River Highway. You have the Hoover County History Museum. The person you have there hasn't been there for about a year and a half. The proper name would be Morgan, Morganne, Pockles, Pockuls. Vanessa's gone off to learn to be a flight attendant.
Mike, can you review, as I recall from earlier discussions about the aesthetics, some of the criteria for aesthetics based on things, restrictions, other strictures that come directly from the Gorge Commission? Can you speak to that a little bit? I think that might inform some of the discussion we just had about who is on the committee and what they will be actually, what input will be taken.
Yeah, so the Columbia River Gorge Commission developed the management plan, aesthetics management plan, I think is the title of it, that kind of outlines the National Scenic Area aesthetics plan. And the bridge is a separate section within that management plan. But it's very vague. There's not a lot of specificity in what you're supposed to do other than like something that is harmonious with the environment. Well, what does that mean? And that's really the committee, is to get down and get into some of the details of what that means from the plan. But the Gorge Commission has the plan and owns the management plan that we have to meet. So there's a permit from them that we will have to get as part of this aesthetics committee development.
So the concept is visual subordination. And those of us who live in the gorge have had to deal with this, and every element you can imagine, from people's choice of house colors to design of freeway ramps and things like that. So it's a pretty, it's reasonably understood because visual subordination has been actively discussed for quite a few decades. And I think the key point is the last one you said, which is that at the end of the day, the Gorge Commission has a role in the Scenic Act to approve this. And we're going to have to go through that process. So we have to make sure that whatever we do meets that. And given the concept of visual subordination, I think a lot of people thinking about the term aesthetics committee are going to think that they get to decide everything from whether this is a, cable stay suspension bridge through colors and lights and all sorts of things. And virtually all of that is off the table. It's the only aesthetic elements that we're actually going to be talking about are things like, treatments of light poles and railings, and maybe the choice of the tone that's going to be poured into the concrete, and maybe some pattern, what do they call them, stamps, pattern stamps that are going to be in the concrete, but it's not going to be how do I put it, from a aesthetics point of view, there are definitely aesthetic decisions that will have to be made, but they're going to be in a very constrained, very restricted space.
Non-structural. Yeah. We have before us direction that is being requested for the approval to reach out to the proposed members of the Aesthetics Committee, as well as adding a member at large from Washington and one from Oregon, as well as the approval of Eric Wilson to serve as the commissioner to represent the Bridge Authority. I would entertain a motion.
So is this a committee that will require will have a quorum requirement? Because I suspect that a lot of these people, a lot of these agencies or tribes will want to have a member, but may not show up. And if we have quorum requirements, we may be in trouble.
Not that I don't believe it'll have any kind of quorum. They're not doing any kind of approvals. It's more of a recommendation. So I don't think there's any need for a quorum.
Grant?
Yeah, just one thing I noticed, some of the people on that list whose names are highlighted aren't members with those organizations any longer. So I don't know if we want to necessarily hold to that same list of exact names or just people from that agency. For example, Heather's not the ED of Thrive anymore. They have co-executive directors, for example. So we may not want to hold to that list of names as much as just those agencies.
I also wonder if we need more community members as opposed to just one from each state. I think if we want to give the community actual say, I think having them have a little bit more of a say on the structure. I understand we want to keep it a smaller group, but I would suggest maybe having more opportunity for community members to have access. Maybe we don't have 2 people come out, but at the same time, at least we're opening it up to have 2 people come out from the community just because it's good faith, hand or whatever.
We can open it up to however we want to do it. I mean, all the meetings are planned to be public, as well as like public workshops. So they'll kind of be there if they show up and are active, then there'll be kind of committee members by that. So
yes, there were a bunch of NGOs on this, and I'm wondering, was this specifically something that was discussed in the EIS, or how were these specific NGOs selected and others not? I mean, there are a lot of NGOs in the community.
it wasn't that specific in the NEPA. It was through just discussions with the Columbia River Gorge Commission of identifying all the active kind of groups in the area. So if there are other groups that we feel like are missing or someone else that should be included, then just let us know who that would be. But this was just going through and looking at all the active members, active groups in the area, kind of trying to come up with the best list that we could. So if you feel like there's something missing, there's nothing restricting adding more folks or changing out the folks. It was just, like I said, some collaboration with the Gorge Commission on who should be potential members.
I'm just wondering what we do when some other group comes along and says, well, it's not allowed to be in this. It doesn't seem like we have any standards by which we're selecting, therefore we don't have standards by which we can reject.
Correct. If somebody wanted to participate that was not included, they would be able to participate. It wasn't intended to be exclusive of anybody. So yeah, we can add people if they were active and wanted to participate. There would be no reason we couldn't add them to the group.
I think what we're kind of getting at is if you do have at-large members, then how do you find those people or get those people involved? And because that's what we've done, I think, is we've largely let the governing body for this kind of piece from the NCIS help us select those that would provide input. So, and I think Marla, you brought up a good point. Who do we want from the community that can start to voice those interests, and how do we determine who that is? And maybe it's 4, not 2.
Yeah, sorry, I know this is on the consent agenda. Now we've made it a whole business item, but but I do think like there's maybe a way to problem solve this backwards of like right now there's 27 seats on here. Like, do we have an objective of what is the full seat count that we're trying to get? And then is there a balance of that needs to be nonprofit organization with an associated interest seats, public seats, agency seats, and what's that balance? And maybe by doing it that way, we figure out a formula where there's a lot of NGOs and we're trying to fill 3 or 4 NGO seats. So it helps staff out of if you get a lot of no's, but you get a few yeses once you have 3 done. And then to Arthur's point, it gives us some ground to stand upon in fairness of how we are approaching and not showing favoritism just because maybe some NGOs are more top of mind to a certain group versus others. So I still support seating the consent piece, Eric, and checking that off your list, but it does seem like maybe there would be a way to still stay within the requirements of how this committee needs to be formed and the representation, but maybe revisit instead of just the longer list and us adding to it. Like, what's the aim? Is it a group of 20 people or?
Yeah, we felt like a 15 to 20 was a manageable group. And that's where we were trying to narrow it down to 15 or 20. The makeup of that 15 or 20, everybody probably has a different opinion of what that makeup is. But if we had 20 and we had 3 people that are like, hey, I really want to do this, then we'll have 23 members. That was kind of our thought, was that we start with 15 or 20 and we have the first meeting and see who shows up and kind of go from there as far as who participates, and leave it up to people that are wanting to be engaged and want to work on it, then allow them to work on it. And the ones who don't, we've at least opened it up and offered it to them.
I think one of the things that matters about this is that in the end, it is this board that makes up the final determination on the aesthetics and everything else, because we have to look at the dollars and cents of it. And so this is kind of a way to tie us together with the NGOs as well as the Gorge Commission and make a big tent for everyone to fit underneath. And so while they're making recommendations, you may end up having, recommendation option 1 and recommendation option 2 based on 2 different facets of the group, which is totally okay as long as it's going to help us get through the permitting process through the Gorge Commission.
We have to meet the intent of the, NEPA commitments that were made. And you're exactly right. The idea is that they will present some alternatives that will be brought to the board to make a decision on. We also want to get the progressive design build contractor and designer on board and involved in this committee in order to validate cost and schedule impacts of whatever the recommendations are. So that was also part of the thought process, was get some ideas flowing, get some people engaged, find out what the cost, get some recommendations that ultimately will come back to the board to make a decision on.
With all of that, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to create the aesthetics committee with having our board representative be Mr. Commissioner Eric Wilson, not necessarily keeping us held to the names that are on the list that's been submitted, but allowing us to have those agencies be contacted by staff, and then allowing those agencies to determine which person would be potentially representing them, period. Also allowing at the first committee meeting to allow more people to join if they really are gung ho wanting to, which would then supply or have that at-large membership. Period.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, sir. We're getting a little worried.
I wasn't trying to behave.
Okay, there was a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I actually think it's going to be very important that we let especially these agencies or any people at large know kind of what the sidebars are on this. Because I mean, 90% of the people I talk to about the bridge have aesthetic opinions, which are well outside of the range of what we're going to even be, what's going to be responsible or useful to talk about. So I bet that Mike can help rein that in a little.
So one of the documents that was in the packet was the purpose and need of the committee, and that was one of the first activities was to adopt that purpose and need, so everybody has a clear parameters of kind of what the charge is of the committee.
I don't remember that describing. Yeah, but I don't remember that specifically restricting it on the visual subordination, et cetera.
It's definitely broad. Visiting it right now, it could give the impression to the public that this group will be sitting down and from scratch drawing what they envision the bridge to be.
Okay.
If we have to, we can write up an R2A2 on it.
We'll take a look at that and see if we can revise it down to follow what the NEPA commitments. The NEPA was pretty specific in the commitments, so we didn't want to sound too restrictive right out of the gate, but I understand your point that we need to put some boundaries at the beginning, so.
So just the final thought that I know we're kind of coming at this as a commitment that we need to do. I think there's an opportunity here to make it more than just a checkbox. And I think we ought to kind of really consider what it looks like when we're 3 years down the road and looking backwards, because I think we can lay some groundwork with this early that will help us 3 or 4 years from now.
With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, we will go back to the legal report if our legal is availability.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to provide you with the report for the month of October. As we indicated to the board, we were going to be providing monthly reports. In looking through the report that we submitted, I'm just going to give the general points of it, which will not implicate an executive session, unless, of course, Mark hears something in here. If there's some dialogue that he believes should be an executive session, I'm going to defer to him. The first matter that's on the October report is concerning the intergovernmental loan agreement, the IGA, intergovernmental agreement with the Port of Hood River and the authority. We've completed a draft of the IGA. We had a communications, I guess, I think it was last week when we spoke with Mike Shannon and some of the commissioners regarding the draft terms in the IGA. And I've received some comments, I think, from Mike Shannon. And so I anticipate that we will be refining that agreement at some point. The next item was and still pending, as I understand it. Dakota's provided a comprehensive review of the bylaw documents that were provided to us. And I believe the last information I received on that is that the authority is working on their end with regard to those particular comments. And I anticipate that we will be receiving something that we can finalize with the authority on with respect to the bylaws, so that they could be presented and reviewed by the board. We were asked to do research on ODOT and WashDOT rules, roles, and responsibilities. And we're in the process of doing that research with respect to those agencies and other agencies that will be involved or implicated in the financing, the design, the permitting, and construction of the new bridge, and the demolition of the existing bridge. We hope to have a summary of that research to the authority by the end of the month, which is fast approaching, obviously. With respect to the request for proposals, and I know the agency is intends to get those documents out on the 31st. Dakotas with Foster Garvey made some comments to the RFP. We had actually had a conversation or conference, I believe it was last week, and went through some of the issues that we had or that were raised, and had a good discussion with HNTB and through Mike Shannon. And I also believe there may be some issues open still for Foster Garvey with respect to an review of the insurance provisions. So I'm going to defer to Foster Garvey on that. I anticipate, based on just conversations I've had, that they will have that review done within the week. We have provided, reviewed, and edited the draft section 106 MOA that addressed the new bridge and the demolition of the existing bridge. And that's been posted in the SharePoint file. I'm not sure whether Foster Garvey has reviewed that yet, but once that takes place, it will be passed off to the authority. We're in the process of drafting and reviewing and drafting remaining policies for the agency. We were provided with, for example, Title VI, the public records and reimbursement policies, and we anticipate having those comments to the authority within the next 10 days. Foster Garvey prepared and did significant research regarding application of the public meetings law to the agency, particularly with respect to committees, which of course was a specific concern. And Foster Garvey has provided several, I believe, memos, a chart, and there may be additional information that's coming that I think clearly sets out for the authority the parameters of when the public meetings law would apply. With respect to the tribal memorandum agreements, my understanding is Foster Garvey's reviewing those MOAs received to date and is continuing or will be meeting with the tribes in early November. And the last thing I have on my list is consideration regarding legislation that may be needed or recommended to include the authority in the Oregon Tort Claims Act, and also some research as to whether or not it might fit within, or what legislation might be needed to designate it as a special district eligible to participate in the special district's insurance services trust. And again, that's being headed by Foster Garvey. That's really the report I have for October. And if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? I would say thank you so much, because you have done an absolutely tremendous amount of work in the last month, and thank you for all the memos.
You're welcome.
We are well read now. Okay, moving on. Funding and finance. Grant, have you had a chance to get together with your group?
Yes, we did on Wednesday afternoon. And it's nice that Seth and Ben are actually there to cover a lot of stuff, because it's difficult to do over Zoom. Let's see. We reviewed all, bring everybody up to speed on what was going on, review everything that we've done up to date, go over our outstanding needs on a few things. So I'll just go down my list really quick. I was at the IBTTA conference last time. It went fine. A lot of the things that were there were more operational in nature, having to do with vendors and tolling and whatnot. The related question I had for that, which for the engineering committee, was if we chose to do a looped tolling system. A couple different tolling systems we can do, one that's entirely out of the concrete or one that relies on loops that are embedded in it. And so I was just curious on if there was a requirement, which way we go with that. Regarding the finances specifically, we discussed any potential cash flow issues and are working on a solution for that, including lines of credit and whatnot. Related to those things, we'll need direction on who or how we want to bring in our own fiduciary. If we want to which agency we should use for our bonding agency to do an investment credit rating analysis. If we are the ones related to building the bridge, if we're the ones taking on hedging against our two main components of the bridge in terms of material costs in concrete and steel, or if our contractors are doing that when we award a contract. And then the other question that came up was housing contractors, if we have the ability to do that in our contracts. So those are things we discussed, and let us know if there's anything else that we need to review or go over. One additional ask that I have for the rest of the board is I was approached or asked by Paul, the mayor of Hood River, Paul Blackburn, if it would be helpful for us when we're going out for these grants at the federal level, especially if we had a old-fashioned letter writing campaign and got as many letters of support as we can completed and signed by members of the community for these grants. He filled one out and sent one in, but my question was, do we want to push some more of those and get a whole stack of letters to include in our application or not? So that's all I have for you from now. So Seth and Ben can help in a more live face-to-face answering questions and go over anything you might have.
Is there any questions for the committee?
So the housing issue, which Grant brought up, is one that people come to me a couple of times to talk about, and I think that it's worth putting on an agenda maybe for the next meeting. I suspect that Mike doesn't know how zoning works in Oregon and Washington. It's quite unlike any place else, and so we probably should be starting discussions with both counties and all three cities about what things might need to be done from a regulatory point of view or from a code compliance point of view related to housing. So can we add that to an agenda? Unless, have you solved the problem already? Should I just forget about it?
No, I have not. There's this one. There's other ways that could go about solving it. I mean, we could look into the zoning code and housing code to see if there's a possibility to create workforce housing. That might take time. We would need to start working on that now. There are agreements that we, the agency, could reach with house rental agencies or hotels, of which I will recuse myself from all those discussions because I own a hotel, full disclosure. But there's a number of ways to get enough housing to satisfy our needs for the next 5 years. It's just a matter of reaching those agreements and contracts with the appropriate people.
I think a presentation at an upcoming meeting would be great, because I think this is an area where we really want to focus in on what legislative actions might be taken related to transit-oriented development. This is something the Washington House pushed on significantly last year, and I'm not even clear completely on where they landed. But DOT is also opening up funding streams that connect back to projects that are meeting or identifying a transit-oriented development approach. And so I think it would behoove us to be clear right now on those different lanes we could pursue and which one best aligns with the goals of our project and our neighboring cities and counties.
If I can add to that, so channeling Mike Fox a little bit, he raised this issue to me in different terms, but wouldn't it be great if the result of this project was that all the housing which served the construction process then was available in the community to address an obvious enormous deficiency in workforce housing. I know there have been World Fairs and things like that, where at the end there's properties to be converted into housing, and it would be nice if that happened.
Yeah, I think, and that's exactly, since you, we're channeling Mike Fox there, those were the key talking points we definitely brought up when we were in Olympia last year, because it aligns with that aim that we know is happening at the state level. Great examples, if we are looking for some, the Olympics. I mean, Salt Lake City's downtown rebuild happened as a result of the 2002, and that was all housing they hand over. So I think there's really good reference points.
Just keep in mind, given our timeline, whatever route we choose to go in, we need to make those decisions here pretty quick.
Just to add on that point, I think it'd be helpful to also outline the timeline for when we expect to need the housing in what quantities, so we can try and work back and see what options are realistic given our timeline.
Those are hard to permit. Okay, is there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Grant, and we will move into the engineering.
Right, this wasn't a question for the committee, but I think the committee is actually looking for a little bit of direction on selection of a fiduciary. So, you know, we did our lawyer selection. We had some recommendations from HNTB about how to select a fiduciary, but we don't currently have one. HNTB has a fiduciary, and or the port does, yeah, but we're required to have one. So, you know, there's one recommendation on the table that came from HNTB, which was you should adopt the one that the port is using, or we might want to go out and do an open selection, but we need a little bit of guidance on that before we can go that way.
Thoughts from the rest of the committee? Direction?
Yeah, I was just asking Debbie about this, and she probably is more, understands this better than I do, but I was asking her if we always called it piggyback onto the contract that the port had, and sounds like that may be a possibility, so.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, so, and we can bring you all of PFM's background and the reason, well, actually, so the port was using PFM, but we were using, they're all across the country, and we had used them in the past. But it turns out, in talking to various people at HNTB and actually in a lot of other organizations, PFM is actually highly recommended in this area, and that's the people that you've heard from that have talked so far are actually, well, they're throughout the country, but Mary Francura, who is incredibly knowledgeable and actually works with the Build America Bureau. She's like, and I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but she's like in New Jersey or somewhere like that. Brad is in New Orleans. Peter just told me where he was at and I already forgot. I think he's in the Bay Area. So what we've been able to do is put together a team that just has incredible knowledge in this area. And so, and it obviously it's totally up to the authority to decide what direction you want to go. But one of the things that we probably can do is, because they're already so incredibly involved in this project, we can do something that, and I'm probably phrasing it wrong, and the attorneys are probably going to cringe, but I refer to it as a sole source, and it's kind of a sole source, but what you do is just document basically that this team is already so knowledgeable and so entrenched in this that it's not cost effective to go find somebody else. So you certainly, I mean, we can provide information. You certainly can, you certainly can issue an RFP and look for someone else. My recommendation at this time would be to stay with PFM, simply because I think we honestly got the best team we could have gotten anyway. So it was easy for the port to go with them because we were already with PFM. And so we just, extended our contract and looped them in because they did have so much knowledge in this area. So those are kind of your options that I can just throw out right now, is that you can go out to RFP. We can come up and work with the attorneys to come up with a way to kind of give PFM, to bring PFM over, the team that we have now, bring them over to the Port Authority. So that's kind of, it's up to you.
So this is an area that I know very little about, so I don't know what I don't know. And I'm wondering if we can do a quick survey of our board to figure out who does know anything about this. And figure out if we have the knowledge we need to make a decision.
Is anybody knowledgeable about the fiduciaries?
This is Mark Greeno. I'm happy to meet with a subgroup of any folks that want to discuss this. It's an area that I'm sure both Judy's firm and mine practices in.
That would be great, Mark. And I would say if you could meet with the funding and finance committee, that would be perfect.
Happy to do so.
Thank you. Great. Next up, we will move on to our engineering and construction. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes, we met this past Thursday and discussed our R2A2s, not our R2D2s, our R2A2s. And we discussed it as a group, and we are really excited to have the larger commission put one together, which would allow us then to fit really nicely where we all can work together and understand the roles and responsibilities. We also have been kind of reviewing, if you will, the MOUs with the different tribes and trying to make sure that we have a better understanding of what is being required and asked of us so that we ensure we can live up to our agreement. So that's been slow going. Eric, do you have anything to add?
I think you did a good job covering all of it.
So is it the committee's goal to pass the R2A2 today, or do we want to get all of them in place so that we know how it all works together?
I think it would be good to kind of look through it, understand what's there, maybe have a little discussion on it. I don't think we want to adopt it right now. It's in draft form. Like it's an idea that we had so that with a disparate group, we make sure that we're not dropping a ball in between the seams. And that we've got some idea who's doing what and why before we get too far down the road.
So, and also, it also helps us figure out how to work better together so that we can understand when we can work and which committee, who can meet from which committees with which committees without having any sort of, I don't want to say having to open up, but we want to be as transparent as possible. And so what we're doing as the engineering committee is making sure if we need to do a public meeting for our committee meetings, which it may actually have to happen that way, we follow the rule of the law from the beginning because we want the community to support and understand this is a very transparent, full of integrity process.
Can I share a quote here? If we start squeaky clean, it's easier to stay squeaky clean. Catherine.
Thank you, Eric, as we bumble our way along.
Yeah. For clean.
Okay, any questions for engineering? I'm not seeing any. Either of you have not had a chance, have you? For the committee to meet? Please.
So first of all, we have not had a committee meeting, that's true. We were waiting to have some material to work with. When legal had a chance to review some of those documents, they now have done that, so we can schedule a meeting. One of the issues was we had scheduled meetings for Tuesdays and you are not available on Tuesdays, so we'll need to establish a different time to have our meetings. And then the second thing I've been working on is the IGA with the port. And we had a memo which described the goals for the IGA, which has now been reviewed by legal. And where we are now is that the next step is that I plan to meet, actually, Jake, you're going to meet, join me with that, right? To meet with Christy to work through that. But request, I'd like you to join with me and have a meeting with Christy. I told Christy we're going to be meeting with her to review that so that the whole idea is to make sure that we get both commissions, to figure out a process to get both commissions on board with what we're attempting to accomplish, so then the lawyers can go and make that happen.
Yes, I will make that happen. Next up, we have, unless there's any questions, please, Nate. One thing for the governance folks, we touched on it early on, but I was wondering if we could throw in your all agenda. We still have, a disparate way of looking at how the alternates work between Washington and Oregon, and I don't know that we ever discussed how we were going to either harmonize that or what sort of, rules or guardrails are around that. In the case of Oregon, as I understand it, we are alternates directly to a seated board member. In Washington, it's, I guess, sort of an at-large, I guess you could refer to it as. And so my questions are, as alternatives, what are our requirements and when are we voting members? When are we not? And what are just things around that? I don't think it's a priority item, but it is of some interest to me as an alternative to know what my role actually is, or where the water stops and when I'm wading in and that. So hopefully we can get that on the governance committee's workload.
I think what Nate is saying is that he doesn't like being my alternate because I haven't missed any meetings yet. So I have a history of not missing meetings. But we talked about this a little bit when we created this, and we knew, Jake and I knew that we were going to our commissions, to our boards of commissioners with different proposals. And we did not think that was a problem at that time. This is something, so the two boards of commissioners have, they were the ones who set those rules. They made those appointments under those rules. We could establish in our bylaws a different process, but we would have to then go to the two boards of commissioners to get them to effectively to do an amendment to their appointments to that effect. And I don't, we should probably talk it through at some point to figure out, is there a reason why we think it's necessary to harmonize other than harmony for the sake of harmony?
I don't necessarily, that wasn't totally my point. I don't necessarily mind that there are different versions of it on either side of the river. I think more, my question is more, what are the sort of rules around how those alternates work on each side of the river? So whether they're different or not, just understanding what the role is of those alternates and how they function on the Oregon side within those parameters, and how they function in Washington under the different parameters. That was I suppose, the ultimate question that I have.
Okay, so I'll make sure that we discuss this as part of the bylaws discussion. Yeah.
And I just say, we've started this with inclusivity amongst everybody. And so, I mean, if this were just like a commissioner meeting, then only the commissioners could speak and the alternates would sit there and wait. Where we're like, no, absolutely not. We want you on the committees. We want you here. We want your questions. It's just when we come to a vote, which, is a mere formality, I don't see many votes we're going to be taking where we haven't worked out all the details, since we're trying to build a bridge, not play politics.
Ooh, that's a good thought.
Okay, is there any questions for the governance committee? Hearing none, we'll move on to communications.
Wow, you guys got lucky. You're getting 2 comms reports this month until we switch into our new schedule of each committee having 1 report a month. So this one will be rather short, but we have met with Blake and the rest of the JLO team and continue to refine kind of the schedule for the visit on October 31st and associated materials, and then how those will support or also complement what we will be saying and presenting in DC. So that work is ongoing. And today we wanted to use the time, Anna actually will be your tour guide to walk you through the new HRWSBA.gov website.
All right, I think I got it. And then I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Merrim. I'm Strategic Communications Program Manager with JLA Public Involvement. And I am going to lead us through a little walkthrough of the new website. So this is the website for the Bridge Authority. And so that's distinct from the project website, which has been up for a year or so now. So I'm going to walk us through this new site for the authority, and then I'm going to open it up to questions and comments. It's going to be a short tour. It's a pretty small website. And so we just have the homepage here, and really it's showcasing the project, and this links over to the project website. And so this site is meant to be long-term. And so it's for the authority, whereas the project website is just for the project. And when the bridge is up, that project site might go away. But this authority website is long-term for the rest of the bridge's life in theory. And so it's really for you guys to use as a resource. But it does, since the project to build the bridge is the main purpose of the authority right now, that's why it's showcased on the homepage, and that goes off to the project site. And we will be continuing to put most of our work on the project website. So press releases, videos, that sort of thing, but anything related to the authority as an agency goes here. And so this is the about page. And this is a lot of the same content that lives on the project website at this point. So you may have already seen this, but it just talks about the equal representation and the role of the authority. And then we have a section on the commissioners, and this is something we really want to build out. And so you'll see all your smiling faces here right now. And what we hope to do is have these clickable. And so each of you will have your own bio page with a video. Most of you were able to do interviews with Sam on the JLA team a couple months ago. And so those interviews will be featured, as well as like a Q&A and your titles and all of that. So people in the community can really get to know you a little bit. And so that's what each of these will link to. And so I think I have most of your edited Q&As, but I'm just waiting on a couple more, and then we'll get those all up. And then this meetings page, I'm sure you will all use quite a bit. So this is really a resource for you guys and, of course, the public to join in meetings and see what's coming up. And we also have a new YouTube channel. And so that's where all of these meeting recordings go. And so this links to that channel. And then we have all the meeting documents, which will be posted before each meeting, the meeting agenda, meeting packets, and then obviously the minutes after each meeting. And we're in the process of finding a solution for calendars. And so we'll have this like calendar widget on this website, which will be really helpful in terms of like looking ahead for different subcommittee meetings and seeing who's meeting when and how often they're meeting. And then we just have a contact page. So it's pretty bare bones at this point. And I believe this goes to the info at HRWSBA.gov. And I believe Amy is with HNTB is monitoring that. So pretty bare bones, hoping to add more, especially in the section featuring each one of you here shortly, but open it up to questions and comments now.
So, yeah, this is the last meeting, by the way, we have to deal with this. One of the things I keep on running into still is people think that the bridge has been designed and that's a picture of the bridge. I wonder if we can add a watermark to that, like artist conception or something like that, so people don't get confused.
I think yeah, from a clarity standpoint, we can talk that through with the committee.
And do we know if we can use the .gov website for our public meeting notices, and can we do it just using a calendar, or do we have to have its own individual pages down there?
Well, this brings up a good point, actually, that I thought of when we had the public hearing. And it was noticed in a Portland-based newspaper. Have we established our newspaper of record for this governing entity? Because that is where we need to be posting some of these notifications. And could be posting the broader announcement of our consistent meeting schedule.
So up until recently, my recollection is Oregon required a newspaper of record as well as a physical location where you post something. And they were talking about changing that last session, but I don't know if that was changed. So maybe if Mark could quickly research for us what our requirements are for noticing meetings, that would be helpful.
We'll add it to his agenda. Okay, other questions for JLA or Marla?
This is more of a question for us as a board. We don't have a vision or mission on here. I think that's because we haven't actually finalized that at this point. So just kind of a little broad.
I heard you stepping up to work on that.
Are we all?
Yeah, I think on that topic, communications committee is bringing back a revision to the full authority, so the commissioners can review that and then tweak or refine further. But yeah, in theory, once that is in place, that would be on that landing page.
Any other questions? Just not seeing any. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay, the lobbyists online. We're going to possibly be a little late. Are you there? Yeah.
You may be driving.
Okay.
So on the Oregon side, they are continuing to work with the Oregon Infrastructure Bank on an application. We're waiting on our questions that we had submitted to them, get responses back. And then we'll be able to start filling out that application and moving that forward. But right now we're waiting on them to give us answers back to the couple questions that we had.
And Brad, are you available? There's Katie.
Thanks, guys.
Sorry, I would add, for the Oregon update, sorry, I would add that we did receive one response back, and that was on the question, is the 1% fee charged as the money is used, or is that just a flat fee that has to be paid? And we were informed that it is a flat fee. It's due at time of signing. But if the entire amount isn't drawn, then a request can be made for reimbursement. We are still waiting for a response back about if the 20 million is appropriate collateral or if the loan would require a co-signer. ODOT is checked with their attorneys, but they're doing some due diligence and research, and they're gonna have to get back to us. So we haven't started the application process.
Thank you, Katie. Brad, do you have a better deal for us in Washington?
Well, we're looking into that. We haven't been able to figure out whether there's a similar infrastructure bank tool yet, but we are looking at that. We're also working on with Senator King as well as others to get some of those letter writing efforts on the for the federal funding. We're also beginning the process of doing outreach around trying to pull some of the money forward, at least get it designated more as state funds earlier so that hopefully none of the Washington state money impacts any resources from the feds. So all of those things, it is a short session and a non-budget year coming up. But as we've all know, this project is a very, very high priority of Senator King, who is ranking on the Senate Transportation Committee. And, he is working diligently on trying to provide every avenue for this project. So happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? For either? I'm not seeing any. Thank you both, Brad and Katie. Okay, we will be moving to new business. We have the approval or correction to the minutes from 10-9. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And I would be entertaining a motion. Catherine.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as is for October 9th, 2023.
I'll second.
There's a motion to second to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, the adoption of the holiday calendar. Has everyone had a chance to review the holiday calendar? And who would like to make a motion of who they'd like to follow?
I will make a motion to follow the white salmon holiday calendar.
Is there a second?
You're still on.
Oh, sorry, guys. Jeez.
That's right.
I'll second.
I missed it.
Page 30. Sorry.
And now we can have discussion for those who disagree with following Marla's calendar.
I'd have a question. What implication does this calendar really have? Is it our meeting days and working days for the commission, or will this have any spillover into the bridge contractors and other efforts?
It will not have any impact outside of the board. It's just the board's adopted calendar, but won't have any impacts on the contractor.
And they can change it anytime.
Yeah.
Future did have staff for the authority, it would be the calendar they would follow, but for the near term, it really would just be more about our meeting schedule and when we shift.
Yeah, I'm fine with this. Just Marla's gonna have to remind us.
Okay, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Okay, next up, we have the R2A2 documents as new business. Has anyone had a chance to review those documents? I'm using this as a time for reflection rather than adoption. If there are any thoughts, questions, or concerns, either with the R2A2 or with the engineering.
I appreciate you guys putting this together. I had one comment, specifically in the engineering one around authority. And the authority of is listed in sort of 5 bullet points here. Many of them are related to cost and timeline. But what I was kind of wondering is how this authority translates into decisions around usage and impact to how the bridge can be used, for example. And I'm thinking mainly around like pedestrians, bikeways, things like that. Are there decisions that the authority will take that we should have input in that aren't listed here? Because the way this is worded is we need to get approval if we're impacting any of these things, but it leaves stuff like how the bridge is used off of we need to get approval. And so the way that it words, I could see, we rerouted pedestrians to where it's a kilometer longer for them to get onto the bridge, and we don't need to get approval for that. And I think that probably needs to be captured in here somehow.
I I think you're correct. The context that we were looking at it was in a broader context. I think you could look at it and say, yeah, well, we could lose things that are fundamental program elements to the bridge without asking. That is not the intent. The first phase, the 1A, is really about defining what all those required elements are. And once we get that piece done, then everything starts to lock in. So I think maybe we need to modify this a little bit or think about it in that respect. That is not the intent. The intent is that we have all the elements, and how do we provide those, and then provide the best deal to the bridge authority, both short term and long term, when we deliver the bridge.
Great. So I guess what I'm hearing is that this R2A2 is really specific to the 1A time period, which is mentioned in here a couple of times, but isn't sort of scoped to that in particular. But is that the way you guys were kind of framing it in your discussions?
Yes, I think the way we've kind of conceptualized the delivery is the 1A is where we spend the time to really understand what the bridge costs, how long it's going to take, and how they're going to accomplish it. The 1B is really where the contractor and the design team goes back and they do all the hard work and calculations and number crunching and actually figure out how to make it do. So that first 9 to 12 months is where we're making all those kind of value decisions, I guess is what you'd call them.
The only thing I'd add to that is we are hoping to be really agile and essential when it comes to the contractor and not having to wait for the monthly meet or the bi-weekly meeting, and instead have the ability to make decisions, which we would be empowered to by the larger board. And this would just say that if it doesn't change the cost, doesn't change the time, within this parameters, that we would have the authority to make those decisions, with the understanding that if the larger board was to raise, we can add something in, I think we should, if a larger board was to say, we want, if pedestrians are impacted, that's another reason to come back. I think that's a great addition too, but the reason for this is really, we want, the contractors have been asking us, how do we get decisions and how long will it take? And that's been because of the way that we've been set up and how we're talking about our committee structure. It's actually it's enticing for people to bid and to respond to the RP. So understanding your concern with that, and there might be other concerns, right, that somebody has. That's sort of where we kind of came up with it. I think also though, if we were to make on a larger bridge authority, I think there might be something that we kind of put in there that if it touches on these specific community interests that we have, maybe it's pedestrian usage or whatever, I think we should have a whole thing like the communications is something that comes up that has an impact on pedestrian usage or something. We should all be under the same understanding. I think it could be a larger, like a higher level one, but for us specifically, with the contractor, because of the aesthetics committee and because of all those other different things that are coming into play within the contractor kind of scope, having more reasons to come back to the larger board, I think could be detrimental to the project timeline. But we're not trying to hold anything back and we don't want to be, I don't personally want to make a decision that the board disagrees with, because we want to be all unified on the same page. So I appreciate what you said.
So to pick up on that, but first, I really appreciate that you guys initiated this exercise. And I think it is setting a good example for all the other committees to do the same, because it gives us all the opportunity to imagine how this plays out. And having said that, it makes me nervous hearing that we're trying to make this project more enticing for contractors. These are public dollars. This is a public represented authority. I'm not trying to entice any contractor. You need to meet what we want and the money that we are working so hard to get and deliver this bridge. And honestly, 2 meetings a month, very normal in government operations. And if these contractors work on publicly funded projects, they should have that expectation. The things that I call out here that I think do need to get workshopped further are is this committee or another committee having any ability to set and make the authorizing decision on any selection. I think in the interest of protecting the integrity of this authority and those that are serving, especially on this committee right now, I don't want any decision being made at that committee level. I think everything is a recommendation that is back when it's hitting the larger decisions about the timeline of the project, especially cost. I just think that is a better assurance to the public that we're prioritizing our job over making this inviting or appealing. The appeal is the price tag. They're gonna get, it is a project they will want to bid on. And I think we need to be assertive on appreciating that our project has merit and we don't need to make it like more enticing.
We can have both. Because I thought about this for a while. Mike and I kind of went through another form of this debate a couple of months ago. So number one, I can't delegate authority. And I suspect that that's what you just said also, that we have been appointed with an authority and we can't delegate that to another group. But we can schedule meetings on an extremely regular basis to the effect that we can have a meeting scheduled every morning at 7 a.m. through construction processes or that sort of thing. And then cancel it most of the times, but have a notice, sometime by 7 p.m. that night saying, hey, this is a subject that's going to be discussed at tomorrow's 7 a.m. meeting, either be there or lose your chance on that. But we can make sure that we're in a position to make decisions quickly and effectively without having to delegate the responsibility and without having to give it up in a way that we're not comfortable with.
I think one of the intents as we were developing this was really, to build a bridge, there's going to be tens of thousands of decisions that need to be made. And the question is where do you draw a line on that? And that's what this document is trying to do, so that the authority has the overall, and I think we actually used, Arthur, you had talked about principles or setting ideals of that the authority operates under. So how do you take anything that starts to affect that thought process and kick it back to the authority while you're doing the other types of decisions that need to be made at the lowest level possible that don't affect some of those types of things?
Right. So I think most of the decisions are things which are specified in the contract. So either HNTB as the owner's rep or the PDB, Progressive Design Build company, is going to feel that that's within their purview to make those decisions. We're talking about the ones that rise above that level. And the question is whether I can completely understand that a company that has folks out there pouring concrete or welding steel is going to want to know that they're not going to have to spend money sitting and waiting for a decision to be made. So anything we can do to promise quick decision making, if something comes up suddenly that needs to be dealt with, is going to help keep the costs down, help entice them. We're not trying to entice people to bid on the contract. We're trying to entice people to bid low on the contract so that our constituents don't have to pay more for a bridge. So I get that we want to do that, and that's why I'm saying that we should be able to come up with a very clean structure that says that we can guarantee that you're going to have an answer within 24 hours on any question that comes up, and that mechanism can fit within one that is both recognizes public meeting law and recognizes that the authority has the ultimate decision making. Everyone is available within a very short period of time by minimum by phone nowadays, no matter where you are in the world. So I'm really not worried about us being able to meet quick decision making requirements. I'm sure that there'll be the folks who are the experts on the engineering part of it who are going to be at that meeting saying, we've heard them. This is what we're really strongly recommending, but we're still going to have to take an authority vote, and we can have a mechanism to allow that.
Commissioner.
Hopefully you're referring to me. I'm just gonna start talking. So can we confirm that this is going to meet public meeting records law and that's going to be fine? and everything is above board if we were to go with this plan.
So I'm not sure which plan he's talking about, but we have the legal authority to schedule as many meetings as we want, and we can cancel as many meetings as we want. So I've used some different form of this, not quite this, but we can certainly ask for an opinion from legal. I suggest we don't ask that for that today, but we can make sure we have a mechanism that legal is fine with, where there's a window that opens up at 7 a.m. every morning on Zoom, on the YouTube channel, where the public's welcome to see it and it's been noticed. And I'm sure that we can come up with a mechanism that allows that to meet public meeting law.
Okay, yeah, I think maybe this would be helpful if that was included within the document, just to be crystal clear that would be occurring.
As a direct recommendation for what I think would be a good alteration for this document is, with the context that you guys were really thinking of this in terms of 1A, part of project 1A, with the deliverables of part 1A, I'm a lot less concerned about changes in the use of the bridge as something that won't get presented back to the board. And I think that within the context of these are the deliverables that we're talking about and the authorities that we have, we need to come back to and talk to the commission. And I like this, a short list of reasons why. I think if I know what you're planning and working on, it makes it a lot easier for me to say, like, yeah, great, go for it. If this is a living document for the entire life of the bridge construction, I'm going to be a lot more picky about kind of what goes in here, or make a lot more of a stink about it. So if we can scope it down to what deliverables this actually applies to, say 1A through 2B or whatever it is, I think that would make a lot more sense to me.
So, because I obviously don't want to make the RFP look good for contractors and make it more enticing for contractors. My coming from a consultant point of view, as a consultant, when you're looking at RFP and multiple people have asked us about who do we ask for which decisions and who makes the decisions and what's the timeline. That is not just one person or my own. That's multiple conversations we've had. So we are attempting to ensure we get, honestly, at least 2 bids, because we want to make sure that it's beneficial to our constituents at the lowest cost per day, right? And so we are really working with our knowledge base for the interview and also what makes the most sense for us. So I just want to make sure that you're very clear. There's no intention that we're making this, let's make all the contractors become millionaires. That's not the case. It's more, how can we ensure that what we want as the authority is translated for decision-making? Because as you can see right now, we kind of don't know our own chain of command decision-making policies, except for some of the questions that were being asked. And so we were just trying to create that in that document. The second point is, I think when it comes to scoping the R2A2s, it is necessarily living, because there may be some stuff that we come across that we didn't even think about, we didn't know. So we want to make sure that it is still open, but at the same time, we are sort of wondering how the larger authority wants to work, because there's going to be times that we're going to have to talk directly to the finance committee to figure out where the money is coming from. And is that going to have to be a public meeting? And as I said, we are probably going to have our committee meetings be public meetings because of what we've been talking to about with legal, right? So we're just making everybody aware that with the amount of time and effort that I know Mike Fox is going to have to do with the grant, that's multiple commissioners. We want to be really squeaky clean here. So I think more scoping needs to actually go into which committees work with at what times and what that looks like. But I also think that it's probably beneficial to us to have timelines on these and maybe have end dates. This is good till this time, and then maybe it will change next time, or a new iteration based on what we've learned.
So could we modify this, since this document is kind of being used towards the RFP, which is hopefully going to get us better bids? If there were in there, instead of kind of all this language about delegation, et cetera, if there were simply a commitment on response time, is that something that you could recommend in phase 1A? responses are guaranteed within X number of hours, is that something that's going to solve that problem?
So I should probably send you guys a page out of the RFP because there is some very direct language in there about decision-making authority that is at the project level. I think we should have some more conversations because this is a critical component to this project and to this RFP and in us getting responsive bids. We are not the only game in town. And if we make this burdensome and they do not think there is good decision-making authority, we will not get people to propose on this project. So I think we need to talk about this a little more and we need to talk about how we're going to delegate some of that authority. Because setting up a meeting every morning for enough to get on it, to do a quorum, to have a vote, to take minutes is not going to be something that is going to be practical or possible. So I think there's got to be some more discussion about the level of decision-making and how we're going to do this authority. And one of the things that was put out and is in the RFP is a escalation of decisions. If the contractor does not agree with the direction the project team gives them, they can then go to the engineering committee for a determination of that. And then if they do not like that decision, can then go to the board for a decision. So there is an escalation process, which typically is a DRB or a dispute resolution board. We are using the authority as that dispute resolution board rather than bringing one on. So there is ultimately an end decision that stops with the authority, but there are day-to-day decisions at the project level that will need to take place.
So I don't think anyone has talked about not allowing delegation. 99.9% of decisions are delegated. We're talking about things that have been identified as specific categories which rise beyond that, which is the escalation that you've described. So I don't understand why, if we've identified that the bridge authority is the ultimate decision maker, why is it not helpful to identify that the bridge authority guarantees a response within a fixed amount of time?
I think the fixed amount of time is a great addition that we could add. I was more concerned with when we talk about every decision coming to the board. I don't think that is a practical solution.
Well, I think maybe, and this would be the edit then in the draft right now on page 34, that last paragraph under A, authorities of the engineering construction committee, I would strike the part of that sentence that says either the committee or. If a contract change is required, so there is a direct result of a cost change, that should be the authority. Like, does that provide clarity and also give more flexibility for the things that are coming to the committee to make decisions? Because, I mean, that, as I understand it, tends to be standard.
I'm gonna push you just a little bit, like a cost change where they're saving money, cost change that it's gonna cost more money, because the way we're looking at it is if the total cost, so let's say they want to paint it with invisible ink, right? And it's gonna be on time, but it's gonna be more expensive, but in the end, it saves money because you don't have to keep repainting with the blue ink because the invisible ink lasts forever. Do you see what I mean? It might cost a little bit more in the beginning, but on the long run, you know, it actually saves you money. So we need to be really clear with authority like that, because that decision alone, or what color concrete is it going to be, which will be an aesthetic committee. I don't really know, like, if you could give us something like an example, tangible example, because I think the way that this is written is we want to have a relationship of trust with the contractor of who applies. And so we want to delegate authority down to the lowest level as much as possible, because that produces better results. I think we also trust our project team, you know, representative HNTB as well, but there's going to be some things, I don't know what they are right now, that might actually need to come up. Yes, we could bring it to the whole bridge authority. Yes, of course we can. But at the same time, you're going to need recommendations from the engineering committee. So we thought that might be a way that maybe we write it where we would bring it recommendations to the larger board. So at least you don't have to worry about it coming up and being briefed by the larger authority. Doesn't have to be at these meetings. You just have to be at the one meeting where we're sort of giving you the different options. And that's sort of where we were going with this. Eric, you want to step in?
One of the examples we talked about that I thought it kind of grabs a whole lot of these concepts is the idea of the bridge approaches and what is the paving on them. Ideally, you want a concrete paving there. It's the lowest. It's not the lowest first cost, but it's going to be the best long-term investment for the bridge. You don't have to worry about closing the bridge to repave that as often. There's probably a significant savings to do it in asphalt instead. So where does that engineering committee kind of land on that? I think that's where you can save on first cost if you do asphalt, but you're saddling the bridge with long-term maintenance costs and the hassle of having the bridge down from time to time to redo asphalt. That was one that probably needs to go to the broader authority for it. It's a cost savings, but there's still probably a decision that needs to be made by the broader group on that. I think we can massage this some. I don't think we're ever going to get to the clarity that I'm hearing some people talk about because of the number of decisions. Mike is our owner's representative. A lot of those he is going to make with the design and the contractor team. I think our thinking is that the engineering and construction team is a little bit more familiar with what the issues are, what's being discussed. None of these things are a 2-hour look at and make a decision and move on. Those decisions are being made somewhere else. The decisions we're talking about on engineering and construction are something that is probably a conversation that's going on for 3 or 4 weeks before some sort of decision's made. There are broader discussions that come up to the authority that I think are probably going to revolve around more what happens long-term to the bridge and maintenance costs. What is a direct increase in cost for some unknown reason? Or is there a functional thing that needs to change because we're in a budget problem or a grant doesn't come through or something like that? I feel pretty strongly about this, and I don't know if I can convince anybody, but I think there are a lot of decisions here that this authority doesn't want to be making on a day-to-day basis. We've hired experts to do that, and we will all be familiar with what's going on, but having some of those that just need to be made and moved on, I think will make the ones that are important that much more valuable.
I think that's the common thread, and we're maybe reading this or interpreting it in a different way, because even just hearing like that breakdown, it feels like we're walking ourselves into a place of more complication than less. And a lot of it, have a frame of reference against how does the city handle projects. And yeah, absolutely. A lot of that we trust to who we contract as our engineer on the project. And when I want it to go to council is because the cost is changing. What they signed off for and what has been funded, what we are telling the public and what we are delivering is having a significant change that needs to be publicly heard, publicly accepted. But now I'm thinking maybe I'm coming to the table thinking those are the decisions that are getting outlined here. And it sounds like what's maybe getting cut in here, I would agree, are all professional. And I trust the professionals, even to the point where maybe some of the complication for our authority, because we don't have our own staff, that example of like, well, this committee is going to engage the finance committee on a funding implication. I would say, no, we should be engaging the staff professional that's overseeing the budget and oversight of the project. So some of it's maybe a reset of like what the true commissioners' roles are, whether it's in the committee or here. I'm not trying to take us down a path of like more complication, but the things I saw in here that were concerning and put me a little bit more on defense was this idea of delegating authority down to a committee where they could be making a decision at a committee level that is about a significant financial impact on the bridge. And I don't think any of us want to be doing that.
And I don't think that was the intent of the committee, because it says in here what they can and can't do, and anything that affects cost, time, or time frame via cost all has to come back. One of the ways that I've been pondering based on our memos from legal is one thing we could possibly think about doing is making our committees be advisory to since our staff, and then we wouldn't have to do public meetings all the time about it, because they would be advising staff, and staff would be either making that decision to go whatever it is, bringing it back to the board, and so making, in essence, Mike, that centroid point, then we wouldn't have to do public meetings for every single one of these discussions. Usually you would have an executive director, but we haven't got to that point yet. And then, you know, at some point, if we do bring on an executive director, then you'd have to figure out which side of that is. Because it's kind of like, you know, the difference between the executive side with the mayor versus the legislative side that we are. And so when I think about it, you know, if our committees are reporting to Mike and Mike's reporting that to us and maybe having their help, that may be a way we can get, because it doesn't make any sense that every one of those committees and discussions is always a public meeting and you're always doing it and you're putting it in the newspaper. It just doesn't make sense. And there's a way that it looks like, hopefully, our legal team has found through that, and I think that might be the way. When we bring on an executive director, we probably morph that into kind of a by thing, because you've got your executive director, and then you've also got your engineering owners rep, and that might be more of a combined role. But right now, though, because we're in essence acting as staff, doing things that are not just policy and legislative, we're building a business here, and we're all doing it together. It gets a little messy, but I think we can find a way through it. Great.
One thing that was mentioned earlier is the cost benefit of alternatives, invisible ink, approach aprons, and that sort of thing. If we're talking about delegating those kinds of decisions, one consideration to have is, even though there may be less long-term costs or maintenance costs with some additional upfront costs, that decision or change will directly affect timelines and funding structures that are directly tied to our grants and whatnot. So I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable delegating those kinds of decisions, because if we delegate those, and even though it may cost less longer term, if the schedule of expenses is moved around too much, it might not fit our funding structures themselves. So that's just the one thing about that, the comment about that I wanted to make. I'm fine with generally delegating stuff that doesn't affect the rest of our day-to-day budget or the really small nuts and bolts of things. I think we're competent enough to get that done. That's it.
Yeah, so following through on what Commissioner Anderson said, I like that structure, because basically what we're saying is the authority has delegated most of the decision-making to the project director. And the project director might seek some additional input and assistance from a committee to help him make that decision, but he is ultimately making that decision, or he is deferring to the board for that decision. So I think that's a perfectly fine way of doing it. I think it gets over the issue that Marla and I both have of not delegating our responsibility and clearly delineating the responsibility. It just becomes difficult if we have what's effectively a subgroup of our authority that has a decision-making capacity, that has something delegated to it. I don't know how we do that, but I certainly know we can delegate to Mike, and we've obviously done that.
Any other thoughts for this discussion? Not seeing any, we are not taking any action, so I know I'm gonna put some more thought into it, and maybe have that conversation with legal about, can we do that, and is that a way so that our subcommittees are acting more as advisory to Mike, so that then we can get out and from worrying about all those issues. Might make life a lot more logical. Okay. Where did mine? We will move on to informational items that staff would like to hit.
We talked about the website RFP schedule. We have one upcoming presentation on it's the 12th, I think, not the 14th. To Columbia River Gorge Commission. That's just a project update. So we'll be doing that November 14th. Office location update. We're working through the lease. Our legal team has looked at the lease, made a few comments. So we will work through the first chair and get the lease finalized. My goal is to have our meeting on November the 13th at our new facility. So that's the goal. Hopefully we can get there and do that. On the attendance on 10/31, I think I've wrote this down. Where did I write that down? Oh, I just want to make sure I got everybody. So right now I have Commissioner Edwards, Gilchrist, Fox, Polson, Keithler, Wilson, Babbitts, and Berger are attending on the 31st. Did I miss anybody that's planning to attend?
I don't know where I'm going to be on the 31st.
Well, yeah, the asterisks with Grant.
Yeah.
There's little ones here or not, so. All right, so that is coming together. We've talked about that. I just wanted to confirm if I was missing anyone. The public meeting flow chart, there was a flow chart included in your information that was kind of to help with the public meeting law. We might have changed that, so I will postpone that until we decide our direction going forward. Yes, that's a lot, yeah, anyways. Talked about the rest of them, the toll revenue reports was also included for informational. Is there any questions related to the toll revenue report? I think we were just under 400, like 397 for the month of September. So that was pretty good. I think that was right on track with where we thought we would be.
It is right where we expect to be.
So
You say where were you be expected to be? I would love to know more about how those expectations are developed. You know, when we aren't, just to be completely like, we aren't talking tolling. I know I'm part of the finance committee. This is not a finance committee question. This is more along the lines of trying to understand how tolling works and how it works here. If I know how you guys do your expectations, I can figure out how I should think about it.
So I'm going to be really simplistic here because and you were not part of developing this toll increase, but as we worked through where the bridge authority will need to be in order to have the reserves that you're going to need to have in order to borrow money, we came up, and I shouldn't say we because it was kind of a combination. HNTB came up with some projections, and also the Washington State Transportation Committee contracted with CDM Smith to do a very, very high level traffic and revenue study. And so between the two, we actually came up with the idea that we were going to need to raise approximately $1 per crossing in order to meet those reserve requirements. We have approximately 4,000 crossings, or 4 million crossings per year, which would give you approximately $4 million a year if you raised it $1. But of course, and it didn't raise $1. It raised 75 cents for breeze by. It raised $1.50 for cash. But when you average all of that out and look at the statistics and all of that, it actually comes out to about $1 per crossing on average over the course of a year. And so I took that $1 per crossing, said, okay, that would be $4 million a year, but it started on September 1st. So we missed out on July and August. And so I came up with about a $3.6 million average. And this would be slightly under that, but September starts to be the slowdown. So September, it will slow down all the way through January, February, March, because it's going to be just your regular, people on the Washington side that need to get over the Oregon side on a regular basis, people on the Oregon side that need to go over to the Washington side on a regular basis, and you don't have all your tourists and that. And so May and June start to really pick up. So you're going to be a little bit low if you took that 3.6 million and divided by the 10 months that you're going to get, you're going to be well, and actually you're probably right about there. But anyway, you're on that trajectory to get to about $3.6 million for this fiscal year that will end June 30th. And so that's where I say we're on track. Is just kind of it is definitely a back of the napkin type estimate. But I find that the way that we've approached it, that will actually work. And we don't really need to get more in depth on that at this time.
Any other questions? I just really like to see the dollars rolling in. We have some upcoming action items for everyone to review. I don't think we need to discuss any of it. We will be having the raised grant scope overview probably at the next meeting.
Yeah, just an update on raise grant. We are working on the agreement. We have to wait for FHWA to do their headquarters to do a national training before we can actually work through the agreement. They do not have a date right now of when that training will happen, but we're going ahead and getting the grant filled out as much as we can, getting our scope ready, getting everything. We're talking to the cities about how they're going to be involved in that. So that we're ready whenever they do the training, but we're not allowed to do the grant agreement until they do this headquarters training. So that's why it's a TBD until we get that training done.
Okay, we will also mention that our next Monday meeting will be Monday, November 13th, 2023 from 2 to 4 p.m. Location may be in the White Salmon Council chambers. It may be in our new office. We will see when we get our lease signed. And we have action, and we will be into our first executive session. Pursuant to ORS 192.660 subparagraph H, which allows the commission to meet an executive session for the purpose of discussion with our legal counsel on the roles of the governing body. I will mention that representatives from the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. That includes Zoom. And we will, I will note that any deliberations or decisions will be, of course, entered into in public session. So no decision will be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will only be returning to open session to adjourn. So we will be not allowing everyone back into the meeting after we finish the executive session. And with Oregon rules, I don't have to tell you how long we're going to be in there. So yeah, there's a lot of weird differences. If you're coming back.
Coming back to make a decision, then
Yes.
you tell them when you'll be,
Yes.
you have to let them know when to come back. We're not doing that, so.
So with that, I would ask that everyone online, please, that is not available for the executive session, please leave yourself, or we will have you thrown out. And there's some really weird changes.
It's not weird.
No, I really like them, and let the record show. I actually appreciate the Oregon executive session rules. Even though allowing the media is really weird.
Executive session.
All executive sessions have to allow.
I had an executive session where the newspaper editor got into a screaming match with our attorney. And unfortunately, it wasn't recorded. And the alternates thing.
Oh.
Right.
Oh, I'm
You
not
should
an
have said
alternate.
that, yeah. You can specify anybody who can stay.
Okay.
We should have specified.
Okay, I haven't finished it, so I will specify the alternates are allowed to stay, as they could be making deliberations and decisions as well. Really?
If you want, it's.
Really, staff members, okay.
You can decide who needs to be there.
Oh, it is so interesting.
Maybe we should have been based in Washington.
With that, of course, we will have Mike as well as staff. And this is a great run, and I think we can stop the recording if we didn't do that. This record button.